right, hello everybody, welcome. This is the November 13th, 2017 regular meeting of the Edina School Board. I do call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. The first item on our agenda is approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the October 23rd special and closed meeting and the October 23rd regular meeting?
So moved.
Second. Are there any changes to the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes from October 23rd special session and closed meeting and the October 23rd regular meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Next, we have recognition. Is our Mr. Kyle? Welcome.
Thank you. We are here tonight to recognize Anand Mittal, who has done a really remarkable thing. He auditioned for and was accepted into the National Association for Music Education, which is the large national umbrella organization, into their wind ensemble, and was accepted as one of just a few students that make it into that national ensemble. So Anand will have the opportunity to not only perform at Disney, but he'll also have the opportunity to perform in Carnegie Hall as part of the National Wind Symphony, which is quite a big deal. He will perform with other students that were selected into this ensemble, and he'll be playing under some of the finest conductors that are out there. So it's quite a feat. The interesting thing is that while we have these opportunities that come up from time to time, and I'll maybe float the ideas out to students, Anand did this very discreetly just because he wanted to challenge himself, put himself out there and see what he could do. No surprise to me with his skill set that he would be accepted and be in the ensemble, but we're thrilled to have him represent Edina High School and Edina and Minnesota on this national stage. So it's quite an honor for Anand.
What instrument?
I play B-flat clarinet.
And did you bring it with you?
I did not.
Oh, so we don't get a performance tonight?
No, sadly no.
You could hum a little something for them.
What's more interesting to you, Carnegie Hall or Disney World?
I think they're both like really great opportunities to represent the school. I mean, I can't really choose between them.
He's being modest. His older brother was accepted into a national wind symphony that performed at Carnegie Hall, but now Anand is at a higher level. He gets to do both. So I think this is a little putting bro in his place.
Congratulations, Anand.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Next, we have hearing from members of the audience. We do welcome public comment. We request that people keep it at 3 minutes or less and do not make comments about individuals. If you have comments about individuals, then we would request that you contact the superintendent directly. So we do have a group and 3 people who are here to speak. We're going to start with Melanie Sorensen, Cheryl Barry, and Kate Bierke. Welcome. Just go up and grab a microphone.
Is it on? Thanks for having us. My name is Kate Bierke, and I represent Concord Elementary. And with me, I have Melanie Sorensen representing Countryside Elementary and Cheryl Berry representing Cornelia. We just wanted to come to you guys. After the recent election this last Tuesday, November 7th, we had several parents and staff express their concerns over having the public in the school buildings during the election. I think in a day and age where guns and attacks have become more prevalent, people are more concerned about the safety of our students. So we are proposing that we make a change, and we are hoping to work with both the school board and the city council, who we've also discussed this with, to have a couple options. First and foremost would be to move polling locations out of schools or learning environments that house children, including preschools and daycares. Option B, if we need to, would be to make election days an in-service day for teachers so that students are not in the building. Option C would be to provide additional security at the school entrances, and when I say that, I mean police officers, not just parent volunteers standing between students and the and the community. And option D, if it would come to it, would to be asked that we not have school on those days to resolve the public safety concerns. We just want to draw some attention to some key points. We know that Election Day increases traffic and people in our schools. We, as a school community, just spent close to $8 million trying to secure our buildings to keep people out of the buildings during the day. And I feel that this is very counterproductive to what we were trying to do by then on that day when everybody knows that our doors are wide open, that people can come and go as they please. Several states and counties, including New York City, and a county in Florida have decided to close their schools on election days. It's known throughout the state that they will not be open if schools are going to be used. We did a little bit of legwork in looking at the different precincts, and there were, I believe, 7 precincts where either a church with a preschool is used or an elementary or middle school is used as a voting site, and we came up with some alternative options that we'd like you guys to both look at and the city to look at. And the reason we're presenting it to you tonight is we know you're also hearing from the calendar committee, so if moving to a different location isn't an option, then it will affect our school calendar as a public school district. So I just want, I have proposals for each of you if you'd like to look at them. Keep it in the back of your mind as we're moving forward with this, and we'll keep in touch. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. I do understand, I think you've talked to the superintendent and he said he would follow up.
We did, yes.
Great.
John was very receptive to it, so I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Next we have Tim O'Neill. I think you're familiar with the setup.
Sorry, my wife Annie was hoping to be here tonight, but she's home with our 4 kids, so I'm speaking on behalf of her and myself. My name is Tim O'Neill, and we have 3 kids at Concord and a 4-year-old that will be in kindergarten at Concord next year. I wanted to start, first of all, by thanking the 4 board members, Lisa, Randy, David, Regina. Your time has been very appreciated over the last 4 years, so we wanted to sincerely thank you. My wife and I saw that on the agenda tonight, open enrollment and class size policy will be discussed. First, regarding open enrollment. Statute and board policy provide that open enrollment can be set to the lesser of either A, 1% of the enrollment at each grade level in the district, very roughly 85 students, or B, the number of students at that grade level enrolled somewhere else, which is again very roughly 15% of the student body. The board can, by policy, choose the lower of these 2 numbers, although it appears to always skew, or recently in years, skew to and favor the higher number, 15%. We're wondering why that is so. As we heard at last month's presentation on current and projected enrollment in the next 4 years, 4 of our 6 elementary schools are projected to exceed maximum capacity. In light of this, shouldn't we be proactively revisiting and revising our open enrollment policy? For example, perhaps we could implement a rolling admission process and/or a more conservative early admission in order to account for more Edina families moving to the district in the summer months. The proposed revisions to the policy up for discussion at tonight's meeting do neither. We ask, why not? We look forward to hearing from you tonight what steps you will take to improve the open enrollment policy. Second, regarding the class size policy. We see that tonight the board will be voting on the recommendation to rescind the class size policy, and we ask, why? Is there a plan to replace it with another policy? The reason stated for the deletion of this policy was that class size and staffing information were contained in the annual administration report to the board last month. We all rely on the school board to set and implement policies that lead our district. To delete this policy without a plan for its replacement leaves no action plan to follow when our classes exceed capacity, as is the case in 22 of our elementary classes currently. Why is this policy being deleted? Most notable is the deletion of the section that allows additional classrooms to be added when a grade exceeds the recommended class size range. The enrollment presentation last month although very thorough, does not lay out an action plan or give an option to add an additional section when a class size guideline is exceeded. We need a plan, and we need accountability. As elected representatives of families in the district, we need to trust that you have an action plan in place to address one of the most important issues currently facing our district, growing class sizes. We want you to be proactive and not reactive. We see a lot of families moving to the district, and as demand continues to grow, we ask, what plan or policy will you implement to effectively manage class sizes? In closing, we look forward to hearing this evening's discussion on number one, what improvements to the open enrollment policy you will make, such as more conservative rolling admission process, and number two, why you've recommended to do away with the board's class size policy. Thank you again for your time, and we anticipate your discussion tonight.
Thank you. Next is Emily Aviles. Welcome.
Well, good evening, board. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Emily Aviles. I currently have a third grader at Highlands Elementary and a 2-year-old who runs our house and will hopefully be a future Edina student. My main concern tonight is piggybacking off of Tim's concern regarding class size specifically. I was able to review the data that was presented and collected by Mary Manderfeld and Margot Bach at last month's meeting regarding specifically enrollment projections, class sizes, and facilities. And certainly it does appear that there are going to be some future challenges specifically for the Edina schools and more specifically as the elementary schools. I'm here tonight to request that the board work with administration and teachers closely to plan for the future so that there are proactive plans in place related to class sizes, structural facility challenges that will hopefully help to optimize learning. Certainly this is a topic that is very personal to me as my current third grader at Highlands has been in very large class sizes in both first and second grade. He was in with 27 other students in first grade, 28 in second grade. In second grade, I was able to be an active volunteer weekly in math class, and certainly as the year went on, I observed the various obstacles to learning in this very large class. Currently, his third grade class is 30, but the district was able to hire a 0.6 FTE that is being utilized for core classes. Again, I am very fortunate to be able to volunteer weekly in his class, and I have personally witnessed the positive impact that this has had on the learning environment for these kids. Certainly I could go on to cite research that has looked at national data surrounding classroom sizes, the SAGE program, the Tennessee experiment. However, I feel that it might be a little more personal to share a story from my 8-year-old. So my 8-year-old, is technologically advanced, and I keep pushing him so that he's up there with the world. He likes to listen to podcasts on his Nano. We listen together, we discuss them. It's a great experience for both of us. One that he currently likes to listen to is called Short and Curly. It's an ABC radio presentation that deals with ethical questions for kids specifically. 2 weeks ago, he listened to the podcast, Is Your Classroom Fair? And afterwards we spoke. Tell me, what do you think? Is your classroom fair? And he sat back and of course, I'm a very proud mother, and we all have the best kids around, but he sat back and he thought for a few minutes, and he said, Mom, second grade, I wouldn't have been able to say my class was fair. There was not ever enough attention that could be given to me because there were always too many other kids with too many other challenges. However, I feel that this year in third grade, I am in a fair classroom. That the teachers do have the ability to tend to all of our educational needs. In closing, I certainly would just like to challenge the board to work directly with administration to ensure that we can continue to ensure that the future of Highland students have a positive educational experience so they become lifetime learners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do appreciate everybody's comments. That is the end of the public comment. I do want to note that next month, right, we're adopting a slightly different policy. So we'll still have the opportunity to come before the full board at 7 o'clock, but at 6:30. Am I right that we're starting this yet? So at 6:30 on next month, we will have an opportunity for people to come and provide questions in advance. So I think hopefully this will be put up on the website where you can submit a question in advance and then have a response available for you at that 6:30 session. And we'll probably have a 3 to 4 minute time limit for people to speak and hopefully have a little bit different engagement than what happens here. So with that, we're on to the consent agenda. So I understand there's a couple items to be pulled from the consent agenda.
Yes, I was wondering, I would like to propose removing, I believe it's the contract. Item D, thank you. And also, I'd like to propose removing the district committees, councils, teams from the consent agenda as well.
Okay, so
item E and D.
So D and E are removed. Do you want those discussed tonight, or you want to bring a motion to table them to a subsequent meeting?
I would motion to table both of them.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Any questions about tabling D and E till next month? All in favor of tabling, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Any other things to be removed from the consent agenda? If not, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
All right, all in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. We are on to reports and discussion. I believe that the first item is school calendars. Gwen, I think that's your favorite topic.
Do you know why she was tabling? Their parents aren't listed.
Good evening. We have had the chance to, we have a great committee working on the calendar for 2018-19 and 2019-20 school years. And on the committee, we had parents, we had staff, and we had administrators. And so tonight, I'm pleased to introduce J.D. Shaw to my left, who is one of the parent representatives on the committee, and to my right, we have Kate, Kate Strand, who is a preschool teacher, as well as Randy. And they have been participants of the committee for a number of years, and so we are all going to present information about the two proposals for 2018-19 and then two options for 2019-20. And to remind the public, we are presenting options which we have gotten feedback from a number of school staff as well as parents, and then it will be up to you to decide which option will be selected for each of the 2 years. So I would like to say that we had a survey that went out in September, and we had over 4,100 participants, and that included students from the secondary level. We had parents, and we had staff members who participated. We looked at the parameters that you presented to us, and we looked at a number of other matters that we needed to consider as our community becomes more and more diverse, on how to make sure that it is a calendar for both years that reflect the needs of as many people as possible in our school community. So I'm going to turn it over to Janie first, who's going to talk about the two options, and we have some positives and we have also some challenges for each of the years, and she's going to walk us through that.
Okay. We can start with the 2018-19 calendar, option A. There are a few things to highlight on there as far as positives. Obviously, no school the day before Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving week is like it is this year, where there would be no school Monday, Tuesday, and then be off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We have a mix.
Would be school.
I'm sorry, yes. Yes. There's a mixture of early releases and late starts. So there is 2 late starts, 2 early releases in this calendar. We have that Friday off before spring break, which is nice.
So, Janie, just
Yeah.
On that one, it says that it's an early release that day on our calendars.
On 2018,
2019 for March.
let me look. Yep,
But
you're
I saw
right.
that in the recap, and then I
Yep.
saw that, so I just
You're
was
right.
wondering if
That's
that's a
true.
change.
Nope,
We should note on our-
that should say early release. Mhm. So for the positives on the option A, it
Okay.
should say early release.
Early release, not good. Okay, thank you.
On this calendar, the end of the school year will be June 4th. And instead of going to the end of that week, we've taken 3 days off from the winter break, which could be considered a challenge by some people. So instead of being the 2 full weeks off, we would have 1 full week and then 2 days. And we did that because there is a holiday on June, let me make sure I get the date right. The Wednesday, the last week of June, June 5th, is the Eid holiday, which is a very important Muslim holiday, and would take a lot of students out of exams that week, which would be a really tricky thing for the high school to work around, as well as the middle schools too. So we looked at actually having school end on the 4th, so that all students could participate on those exam days. Let me go back and see if there was anything else. We did the same thing with a lot of the late starts and early releases on these calendars to make sure that if there was an opportunity to have those be around some sort of holiday or day of significance, that we looked at doing that. And it also, we thought, would help with parents having to either get childcare or take time off of work. Let me see if there's anything else in that. I think that's all for the option A. Does anybody have any questions on option A?
Well, yeah, so it's only because I'm bringing it up, sorry about that back there.
That's-
Only because it was brought up in option B, but it wasn't in A. So,
Yep.
In option B, you mentioned that AP testing was mentioned in option B, but not in option A. So how will AP testing be addressed in option A?
I'm gonna let Gwen talk to that.
Okay.
So for the AP testing in option A, we will still be able to address those, that there won't be a huge impact, negative impact on the testing, because when we looked at the number of student days in first semester and second semester, it's pretty comparable.
So essentially, there's no difference in AP addressing between the two options?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I wanted. Thanks. Just when typically are the AP tests? Randy?
Typically, that would start in that first week of May, around the May 7th date.
Okay.
They would go for the next few weeks.
Got it, thank you.
So if you look at option B, some of the things I'll highlight on this option are that there is a teacher in service scheduled right after MEA, which we have heard from parents is nice to have because there are a lot of students that use that break to look at colleges. So it was highlighted as being a positive for the high school students. Let's see, what else am I missing? Do you guys have any questions on option B before I start digging in? I'm gonna have Kate talk about the professional days in these two options.
The key difference I noticed on B really is those 3 days in winter break, not allowing us to be out as early. And then also I was curious about days prior to testing too, that A would give us, I'm assuming Gwen, more days and Randy before some of our
Yes.
heavily, and then same with, I noticed spring break jumped a week as well.
Yes.
Later.
Yes, it
Okay.
did.
Okay.
The other thing to note in option A is that because we're moving the days, we moved the start of second semester up. And
Yeah.
it actually allowed a nice 4-day break for students at the end of first semester before second semester started. So there was a natural break there for them.
Oh, yeah, because of MLK. Yeah.
One of the things that I know the board asked us to look at is if there's a way to end the first semester right at winter break. And I thought you were going to ask that, Leny. So, and again, we looked at it, and it's starting school like in the middle of August, which is very difficult with the construction projects. So we felt like our next best solution is to have a 4-day break at the end of the semester. Plus, when we asked that question in our survey, we were surprised. They preferred that it just be balanced, but not necessarily that school would end at winter break. And that was feedback from students. So we did take heed to that.
I'm going to let Kate talk about the days before school.
And Gwen, from what I understand, if we really, because it's usually about a 2 to 3 week difference, that would be 2 to 3 weeks added on before Labor Day.
Correct. When we're really looking at about the 12th to the 15th of August,
Okay.
that school would start. And when I talked with Eric Hamilton about the construction, he said that's very difficult to do.
So one of the difference between some of the calendars is just that the staff development is spread out a little bit. So typically we have 5 days of staff development workshop week prior to school start. And on one of the options for 2018-19 and on one of the options for 19-20, we did 4 days of in-service days and then put one towards the beginning of the year, trying to spread them out a little bit so you have a chance to learn and grow gradually rather than having 5 full days in a row of that learning.
And I just want to ask, so only because I didn't do the counting, are on both option A and B for the 2018 and 2019, are the semesters relatively even? It's on the last page.
Yes, they are. So if you take a look at the June calendar, it will show, the print is kind of small, but it will show the number of days for the semester 1 and semester 2, as well as the 184 days
So
for
most
teachers.
of them are about 86, 85, I noticed, so not across all 4.
Yes, they're,
Somewhere there.
and
It wasn't.
if they're within 3 to 4 days difference, that really isn't that big of a deal for the teachers, for the or those who are teaching semester courses.
Yeah, even with cheaters, it's hard to read.
So when it comes to AP exams, though, it ends up being shorter in the second semester. Is that right?
Yeah.
Because they tend to be in May and school runs a few more weeks.
Yes, but it's still all relative because it's like 2 days difference. 2 or 3 days, the second semester might be 2 or 3 days difference. And when we talked with, if I'm understanding your question correctly, when we talked with teachers who are teaching the AP courses, that was fine.
You're referring to when the AP
Or are
class
you
happened?
asking something different?
No, I mean, the second semester for those people who are taking AP exams pretty much ends at the time the AP exams begin. So they would have less instructional days, I think, in the second semester than the first semester
That's true.
for
but
that group of students.
That's true, but when we talked with the teachers, 2 or 3 days difference wasn't as big of a deal as we would have had for several more days.
So moving on to the 2019-2020 calendars. Option A, some of the positives is no school for students on November 1st, so that day after Halloween, we're letting the kids maybe stay home and wear off their sugar rush. Again, sites, we really tried hard to put all the professional development in the first half of the year, so then they had, but spread out, but then they had the second half of the year to really implement some new strategies. Option A has a 4-day weekend at the end of September, or at the end of semester 1. That's with the weekend. So it's a Friday, data day for teachers, the weekend, and then I believe Martin Luther King Day, Monday. We really tried hard also to have as many full weeks of instruction as we could, and try not to have a lot of months where there were several weeks that were 4 or 3 days in 1 month. School ends on May 29th, and then we really worked hard to do the early release, late start, and teacher in-services on some key holidays to reduce student absenteeism. So one example is that we don't have students coming on Rosh Hashanah on option A, and we do a early release on the day 1 of Ramadan. So trying to take in consideration a lot of different holidays and make it work for many different families. The challenges, there weren't very many challenges in either option A or B for 2019-2020. But one of them might be that there was one less teacher in-service day in August that would take place again on September 30th. Again, I almost see that as a positive in some ways to kind of spread out that learning. And then just, again, back to the testing dates, those have not been put out yet for 1920, so we're still kind of waiting to hear about the ACT, SAT, and PSAT dates. Any questions on option A? Semesters are very even too. They're 86 and 85 for option A. And then option B, again, a 4-day break for students at the end of semester 1 was a positive. Spring break is a week earlier, which might help for some test preparation or have a little bit more time between spring break and testing. School's in session for full weeks in April and May, again, which is helpful for the testing schedules. School ends again on May 29th, and similar to option A, we really tried hard to do the early release, late starts, and in-service days on key holidays. Challenges, spring break is scheduled for the 3rd week in March, which is earlier than previously scheduled, so just kind of a change. And then again, we're not aware of the testing dates yet for those years. Any questions on option B?
So front-loading the discussion with input via the survey was critical to the calendar committee's efficiency and some of the dialogue and discussion. Early releases and late starts are distributed periodically throughout the calendar. The significance of those is to provide collaboration time for staff periodically throughout the year. That collaboration time sometimes occurs in the building, sometimes occurs district-wide, and it also sometimes provides a professional development opportunity that's more dynamic or in response to things that are occurring at that particular learning time. There is not a perfect calendar, although we search for a perfect one, so we continue to work on that, but we are excited about the options that we're bringing you this evening. So at this time, just asking if there are any other questions from our board.
I have a question. First, I want to thank all of you for your work, and please extend that to the rest of the committee. I know it's challenging precisely for what Randy commented on. There is no perfect calendar. Based on what you've put together, I'm wondering if you could share anything from the committee's discussion that a wicked problem that you were wrestling with that would be helpful for clarification as we present the calendars to the committee, and then also helpful background for us to consider as a board before the calendars are approved.
I think always one of the challenges that we face is really, we believe also that it would be great for the students to have a natural break at the end of semester. So, you know, really we do spend time counting those days in semester 1 and trying to figure out how we could maybe make that work. So we spend a lot of time on that. We also, this year, it was really a priority for us to look at those different holidays and how can we make it so that the majority and all of our students, all for all, can come to school on days that are important. So that was a priority for us. We also try to eliminate, we don't want 2-day weeks. So we really try to work around that. With the exception of Thanksgiving, I think we do pretty well with that.
There's also always been that question. Some schools, based on their start times, prefer early releases or late start. Sometimes it's hard. We had one member of our team talk about how at her school, she's a principal, that it's hard because sometimes when it's an early release, they're worried about small children going home to an empty house. So that time, that collaboration time sometimes gets used up with trying to ensure that kids get home. So we recognize that there is no perfect solution for early start and early release and late start. So we did try to balance those as best that we could, understanding that we needed to just break them in half.
So I think the biggest one is the balancing that break, making that winter break shorter. I mean, that's because we heard that the first time around we asked, that was the loudest, that parents wanted, or families wanted, that full 2-week, essentially, break. So that's really the one that I think is going to be wrestling. And I'm sure you guys already wrestled with that, so.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, in looking at 18, 19 and comparing them, I actually kind of went through and noted all the differences and then kind of thought, is there a hybrid here that we could find? Because I think there's some really great things in both of them. As I really appreciated you finding that in-service day after MEA. I thought that was really a good idea. You know, we need in-service, you know, enough into the year that it's of value, but not too far that, you know, they haven't had a chance, or staff haven't had a chance to do that. I agree with Lisa's comment. I mean, I do remember seeing that in the survey, the 3 days, or the desire for 2 weeks around winter break But at the same time, in calendar A, I also remember clear feedback around moving spring break earlier. And so I thought your attempt to get that on the 18th of March and then adding that conference day after was commendable. And then also taking into account what you said about the holiday on June 5th. Giving up those 3 days, and actually if I put it in the education realm versus holiday realm, I do know that getting our days of education in prior to high stakes testing is really critical, and I know that we took that into account the last time we approved a calendar. Also, I thought that having the in-service again in April versus May was more beneficial to teachers and more useful to use that data going forward for the rest of the year. So I would want to just hear from colleagues and staff and of course parents, their thoughts on the winter break. But it seems with going with a post Labor Day start, maybe giving up a few days on our winter break would be more beneficial to education than not.
And actually, can I just, if you could just talk about the committee's thoughts about starting after Labor Day and then before,
Yeah,
that would be helpful for the community to hear, I think.
I talked quite a bit with Eric Hamilton about the construction schedule, and for 2018-19, he said we clearly need to start after Labor Day in order to have the construction schedule will be very tight as it is. So that's the reasoning for that. In the parameters, it talked about the possibility of starting before Labor Day when we could. And so that's the reason for 2019-20 starting before Labor Day.
Because the bulk of our construction will be
Correct.
hopefully done next summer.
Right.
And how many of our students are taking AP exams in the high school as opposed to not taking AP exams? I mean, I heard what you say about the number of days. For those kids who are taking AP, my math isn't working the same as yours, and I'll ask after the meeting to run through the numbers for me. But if we look at the number of kids taking AP versus non-AP, is it more than half the school? And if you don't know, if you could just shoot me an email with a response, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll look that up.
Because I wouldn't want to try to think about the schedule in relation to them if they're only, a third of the school, because that presents an issue for the other 2/3.
AP wasn't the only testing that we looked at. We also looked at it with the MCAs in mind. So if you take that whole elementary population and then the middle school population, a lot of the comments in here that are surrounding testing are related to the MCA testing too. So if you're reading stuff in there about just testing, just know that the majority of that conversation was around MCAs.
Yeah, and I was thinking about the number of days in the semesters, first semester, second semester, because the high school could have a different semester end than the middle school or the
Yes, we
elementary
talked
school.
about that, yep.
Right. Okay.
And
Any,
You talk about calendars that would be different from one building to another, as in secondary versus elementary?
it's
Or did
only-
that not really get discussed in committee?
Actually, part of the parameters said that the calendar needs to be consistent across the board. And so that's what we kept in mind for both years.
And should we in the future revisit that question?
Because I thought that was in our survey.
We asked in the survey, but in the parameters, we asked a number of questions, but in the
Okay.
parameters, the expectation was that we would have a calendar that was consistent throughout.
Okay.
And it's for the ease of families if they have
Yeah.
students at other various grade levels. Lenny, you had a question?
No, if we ended the semester at a different time in the high school, it wouldn't change the calendar in terms of days on or off. It would only change when finals were, so that would accommodate the consistency for families. Okay. Other questions?
Just to make sure that I'm on the same page, A and B for 1920 aren't massively different than each other, outside of that nice day in October that you added after MEA. And spring break being earlier in B as well, correct? Just wanted to make sure. Okay, thank you for all your work.
All right, thank you very much.
And Leny will be approving these next month?
Yes. Gwen, you need these approved next month?
Yes. Please.
All right, next is policy. First one is open enrollment. Regina, are you running us through the policies?
I can give us a rundown on both 510 and 617. So 510 is being reviewed in order to provide alignment with revised state legislation. The policy has already been through its regular review on its cycle. So the change here is the addition of priority 8, which aligns with the legislative language regarding students who live within the city of Edina, but not specifically in the Edina School District. On October 31st of this year, the Minnesota Department of Education updated their open enrollment form on their website, which adds the language about Edina, also consistent with the new legislation. So that represents the change, and I'll just pause to see if there are any questions for 510.
And again, that just inserts that as the statute says they can now have a priority, right?
That's correct.
Correct.
Well, I guess I had asked about this because I wanted to verify that, one, where the law had changed, and then was it truly clarified within the law or from MDE if it's a mandate or if it's opens the door, but it's up to the board to make a final decision.
What the statute does is puts that priority tells you to put that as a priority in your into your list of priorities. That's what the statute does.
So when we get down to that part of our open enrollment, it's after all of the other priorities. So just to clarify, so we're down to the last couple things, and we're into lottery mode essentially, but kids with an Edina address would get first dibs, and kids with any other addresses wouldn't.
So I'm going to give Mary, who does this, just to respond to that, because I think I understand it, but I want to make sure it's true in practice.
Yes, so if you look at the open enrollment website, which is created by the Minnesota Department of Education, we don't create it, we cannot alter it. The priority is for students. A student is a resident of the city of Edina, but the resident school district for the student's Edina home is not Edina Public School. The student seeks enrollment in Edina Public Schools. That's on the entire open enrollment packet. And so, yes, they would be prioritized over any other open enrolled student that does not meet the top priority. So we have, if you look at the priorities, right now it's currently enrolled, staff, siblings, all the way down. And so I think just for kind of information, so information from the city is that there are presently 1,982 units in total number of Hopkins dwelling in the city of Edina is 1,982. Total number of Richfield dwellings in the city of Edina is 4,155. And then the only other one we had from the city was there are 2 dwellings that are in the St. Louis Park. So all of those potential units, if they had families that chose to want to apply for Edina Public Schools, would be part of that prioritized lottery.
And how many kids are not able to enroll in Edina schools that want to, that are currently in other districts, but have Edina addresses?
Well, you know, we've never necessarily tracked that. We've never tracked how many students are presently in, because it's never been a priority before. I think anecdotally, we have more families that have an Edina address that come from the Richfield School District that can't get in than we have typically had from Hopkins, but again, that's anecdotal. And so, you know, just as an example, using this past school year's data, if you kind of go through the priority, we had that priority 1, which is currently enrolled, we had 23 who currently enrolled and then would have had a move out. We had 6 staff siblings. We had 3 A&I siblings. 48 open enrolled siblings, so they already had a student in. New staff, 14, 5 new A&I, and then, you know, a large number of open enrolled that fall into the other category. So if you just took the categories we have right now, that's 99 students.
So Mary, you may have said this, but what are the 5 school districts that are located within Edina?
I'm not sure what the 5 are. I know when we contact the city of Edina and we ask them for the data of dwellings, of house dwellings that are in the city of Edina and in another school district, they've given us locations of 3, St. Louis Park, Hopkins, and Richfield. I'm not sure the other, because at this point, the city of Edina hasn't provided us house dwellings in 2 other communities.
So before we adopt this, we want to make sure that there are 5 school districts in Edina?
Where are you getting 5 on the statute?
Statute. The municipality is located partially or fully within the boundaries of at least 5 school districts.
Well, actually, the statute, so not the statute, but on the MDE form, it doesn't specify 5. It specifies the student is a resident of the city of Edina, but the resident school district for the student's Edina home is not Edina Public Schools. So they're not talking about 3, 4, or 5. They're talking specifically about city of Edina residents that are, their district would be something other than Edina Public Schools.
So I appreciate that, but MDE can't change the state statute. And so the state statute, unless I'm reading it wrong, references at least 5 school districts.
It's on sub 5A.
Sub 5A lotteries.
Numbered, but which
And
number are you on? So they can
Sub
reference it.
5A,
2, correct.
subdivision 2.
Number 2.
I'm not following. Are you talking about wanting to
In our-
change?
in our
the
green
I get that,
packets,
but,
No, this-
right,
whether it
but
applies to
you-
us.
whether, and we're not drafting the statute language. Our policy doesn't reference 5, the state form doesn't reference 5.
We just want to make sure that we have the numbers.
Well, sure, but
Excuse
is
me,
there a need
it
to-
sounds like based on the information, there is some part of Bloomington and there is some part of Eden Prairie that could have residency that could be in the city of Edina, but not in our
Okay.
school district. So those would be the 5.
Those would be the other 2.
Okay.
Right.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions on 510? Okay,
Okay, 617. So a little background on the move to rescind 617, which is about class size and staffing. This particular policy isn't required by state statute. When we reviewed this at our last policy committee meeting, our goal was to just update it, and as we read it, what we recognized is that the language in the policy doesn't actually provide any guidelines. The guidelines for class configuration and enrollment are a part of policy 604. So the goal was to simplify and not to have 2 policies that might risk having 2 different kinds of language involved. So that's the background on 617, and I can also pause there to take any questions back to the policy committee.
so what does 604 say?
604 has, well, neither policy has, there is no policy that specifically determines class size. That is a separate guideline that the district has always and will continue to have each year, and the school board approves it. And that's always posted on the website. But 604 addresses grade level configuration and enrollment at each site. It acknowledges our primary and secondary level classes, what grades are in middle school, what grades are in high school. Specifically, Section 3D4 does talk about class size guidelines in possibly a little bit more clarity than what 617 had, but we don't have a policy that has ever specifically addressed what class size ranges will be. That's always been a separate board discussion, so there is no intention to change how that's gone forward.
Okay, so how things are going to work in terms of substantively, you're saying it won't change.
Correct. There is no intention to change the substance of practice, and the goal is to maintain the alignment.
So that, like, the definitions and different things, we'll just have those things clarified in other, either policies or within the actual guidelines that we discussed?
Yes.
So one of the questions we left the committee meeting with was, what do we lose if this goes away?
Yeah.
Right.
And my understanding of that
Contract.
wasn't necessarily lose then the district doesn't have it, but that it goes from policy to administrative decision. And was there a follow-up to just that particular question? Is there anything that's no longer, I guess, restricting the superintendent, but more within your judgment guideline that wasn't there before?
Number 5,
That's right.
ability to establish.
I guess what I remember from is most of 617 was actually addressed in 604. Not, it was sort of two separate, that it was just repeating things that had been in other policy.
Right.
And so 617, the question was, is what does that give us that wasn't already addressed in 604 or elsewhere?
Yeah, I think the process does, but is there anything that's, the process is staying the same because of discretion at the administration level, or is it all still the
17.
policies?
604
Power
is
is the same, it's just
We have-
no longer redundantly listed in 604 and 617.
Oh, yeah, we're dropping 617
I think
for
all
604.
I think the policy laid out in 604 will guide us in making the decisions.
But there is no intent to change practice. There was no discussion about intending to change practice. The discussion was more around, do we have any clarity in 617? And the conclusion was no. If anything, there's potential for confusion by having two different policies with similar language addressing the same topic.
So so Amir, 604 says the school board will establish the class size and staffing guidelines. And is that the sentence that you're saying, does that exist in, whatever it is, 617?
Well, it does say establishment of class size and staffing guidelines, the school board will establish. So do we have that in 604?
So is your question, Amir, whether the deletion of that sentence from 617 is not covered by 604?
Yeah, I'll claim that as my question. It was a little more broad, just because we left the meeting saying this seems like there are redundancies, it seems like there are two different places to find information. We did have a couple of follow-up questions, and that's where I started my question.
What I will offer to take back to the policy committee meeting is that we review both 604 and 617 side by side again. I think that's a useful exercise, just to make sure that there is nothing of substance that's lost. And we may then present 604 for discussion at a later date
Well,
to reflect that.
so if you look at 604 and 617 at the same time, and you say 80% of 617 is redundant, then maybe we get rid of 617 at the same time that we amend 604 to pick up whatever isn't redundant.
I think I'd want to, yeah.
Yes, which is what I'm,
Yeah, but I mean.
another
at the same
rephrasing,
time.
yes. We can do them at the same time.
That's all.
Yeah.
Okay, that would be great. And would that address your question, Amir?
Fully.
Perfect. Any other questions on 617?
I just want to make sure that some of the language that I think is leaving 617, that we look to make sure that some of that is added back into 604.
And if you have, we can certainly review that, but if you have any specific
Okay.
language from 617 that you feel is most helpful, if you could pass that on to the policy committee,
I will do that, thank
So-
you.
that would be helpful. Thanks.
So unless there's a need, well, can we just bring 604 and 617 for discussion at the next meeting? As opposed to action, that's all.
They can come back for another round.
Does 604 have to go to discussion before it goes to action?
Because you may be revising it.
If we do
Yeah.
revise 604, yes, we would
Ju-
bring it back for discussion.
Just on that rare thought that somebody has a question about it.
Just making sure.
Okay. Any other questions on 617? Okay, so we are moving on to the action section. And see if I get, Margot, you may have to help me here, but I need a motion to approve the canvassing returns of the votes of the school district general election.
So moved.
Second,
And do we need, okay, do we, we don't need a presentation. This seems pretty self-evident.
No presentation needed.
Rub it in if you want.
Any questions? Hearing none. All in favor of approving the canvassing returns of the votes of the school district general election, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Next, can I get a motion to approve the canvassing returns of the votes of the school district special election?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the canvassing returns of the votes of the school district special election, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Can I get a motion to approve the certificate of election?
So moved. Oh, second.
Any questions, discussion? All in favor of approving the certificate of election, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. And next we have World's Best Workforce.
Oh, we don't have to go through each one of the oaths. It's all inclusive. Well,
I was not advised that we needed to go through those.
Okay. It's all inclusive. Sorry, just checking.
It's okay, good question. All right,
They're all listed separately.
can I get a motion to accept the 2016-17 World's Best Workforce Report?
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
And do we have any presentation of this? Donna,
We had
Randy,
it.
Susan? Anything, I know we had this last month and we had the public hearing. Anything changed since then?
No, we had a board work session, I think October 9th, looking at some preliminary data. We had our public hearing last Thursday on the 9th. Just want to really send a sincere thank you to the World's Best Workforce Committee. We have a number of parents that participate on that committee. We're always looking to make sure we have representative voice. We know we need to work on gaining some additional teachers and students in that arena. This comes out of a Minnesota statute where school districts are expected to develop a World's Best Workforce annual plan and then report on it. MDE gives us a report template that is very brief and very summarized. It doesn't have everything from the plan in that template, but they kind of dictate which elements we're supposed to report on. I will say that of our 5 goals, all children are ready for school, we met that goal. The goals are really developed through guidance from Minnesota Department of Education. And so when we're talking about all children are ready for school, we're talking about our kindergarten students, and we use fast bridge assessments, and we met that goal. When we look at the goal of all 3rd graders can read at grade level, we use MCA evidence and data for that, and we have not yet met that goal. That was helped to be constructed from MDE. Our 3rd goal was all racial and economic achievement gaps between students are closed. We have not yet met that goal. The last 2, all students are ready for college and career. Based on our ACT data, looking at the number of students who hit the STEM benchmarks, we did meet the goal that was set there, and we met the goal that was set around students graduating. We've always had achievement goals as part of our continuous improvement process, and we'll continue to do so. So that's about it.
Any questions?
I just had a quick question. Since it's a statute, is there any follow-up when we have to report back that we haven't met a goal? Or do we just continue to work towards those goals as we go forward? Can you just expand on that?
Thank you. There's not any consequence for not meeting a goal at this point. I think the state is trying to promote locally owned accountability systems that promote commitment to continuous improvement. So.
Okay, thank you.
And if I could just add that this is a guideline that the state would like us to do, but we look at many different other measures of improvement that aren't necessarily here. And we looked at them the first time and then the second work session. So this is just a part of that. So we not only look at these, but within each site, between schools, between us and other Lake Conference schools, those are continue to be looked at, even if it's not in this particular report.
That's correct.
Any other questions? All those in favor of approving the motion to accept the World's Best Workforce Report 2016-17, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is scheduled review of policies.
Well, action.
Yes, action to approve those.
Motion to approve.
Correct.
Yes.
And Mr. Chair, I'd like to propose that, I'd like to make a motion that we remove Policy 624, online learning options, from action this evening. It's customary that these policies come forward for discussion. This one wasn't present on the October agenda, so I'd like to move it forward for discussion
In December.
in December.
Great, thanks.
Okay, can I get a second on that?
Second.
Any questions, discussion? All in favor of approving the motion to remove 624 from the current schedule review of policies, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. And now can I get a motion to approve policies 620, 629, and 634?
So moved.
Second.
Regina, you want to run us through those?
I certainly can. 620, course credit for learning. There are no changes since we saw this in October. Student fundraising, which is policy 629, has had some updates in response to the discussion questions that came forward in October. Primarily, there's clarification of definitions in section 3B. Section 4B adds the word advertising for additional clarity, and the appendix represents the most significant addition. It provides some guidance to students in response to this change in accounting practices, that funds not go into the district account if they're for an outside nonprofit organization. So I do want to thank Stacy Geyer and Sarah Shandel for all of their work to make those updates and amendments, and thank Margot Balk as well for the advisement to keep us in line with all of the Financial Accounting Standards Board recommendations. So those are the changes on 629. 634 with electronic technologies acceptable use has no changes since October 3rd.
Any questions? All those in favor of approving policy 620, 629, 634, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. We are on to announcements. Are there any announcements?
So point of order, Regina, do you want us to go through 624 since we're going to approve it next month, as long as it's there? It wasn't up there earlier. There's nothing
That
really
would be a
changed.
question of just board protocol, because all of the information is here in the packet, and there are very few changes to that particular policy. So I would just ask for what kind of preference the board has in terms of allowing for appropriate discussion.
I think we should put it in a discussion item, but.
So let's just leave it. Is there any urgency on getting that approved?
No, I mean, the current, if we revise the timeline by a month, this one's fine.
Right.
But there are very few changes to it.
So there was a request to have it for discussion. That was the motion, so we'll just keep it as a discussion item in December, and then it'll.
Or Randy, did I misunderstand you though? Were you
Oh,
asking
no,
that it
normally
be
it would be up
discussed
in our
this evening?
policy review section, and we would.
So we could,
yeah.
you're asking that maybe
Should we
perhaps
be
open
reviewing
for
it tonight?
discussion tonight?
Right.
That's all I'm asking.
That's what I understood your question. I think there was a request that happen in December, so we'll stay with that process. And then it'll come up for action in January. Okay. Back to any announcements? Okay. Are there any objections to adjourning? Hearing none, we are adjourned. What's the matter?
So be happy to get home early. I might get dinner.
No, not that.
I know, I had one bite, and I felt weird to eating.
Yeah.
I